Rev up your engines. Okay, now this Honda came over. He was going to have me check it out for wreck damage. He bought it, and he thinks he got screwed over. Well, it won't even start now. It locked him out of the car. So let's see what we can do here. And he's not lying. It will not open. Well, you know, this is one of these add-on to a keyless remote system, right? This is why I tell people, keyless remotes stink. So we'll get the whole thing out here and put it back in. There's this remote. Now he did drive it over here. So I drove it an hour and 20 minutes on a highway. So, you know, it made it here and he got out and now it decided to lock itself. He had it in his hand. It wasn't like he left it in the car. So here's another unfortunate thing. He did say the side of the car was wrecked when it was wrecked. So they obviously didn't put that together. And since they don't bother having a key for the back here, there's no key in the back, so you can't mess with that. And of course, they're too cheap, so there's no key for the passenger door, and it's a two-door car. We're gonna hope that this stupid thing has a bad battery. So it's off for a ride in a motorcycle, get a battery for it. So I went to a Walgreens, we'll put another battery in. Well, guess what? You can see the light's on now. Didn't come on before, it's not working. The light's working, so the new battery's doing its job, but AAA's gonna have to come and unlock it, the Slim Jim, or tow it to a locksmith. Now, as I said, the key should open it up, but this thing wasn't wrecked. This door was wrecked, and they didn't fix it right, so we can't get in with the key, even though we have. All right, so the AAA man made it. He jimmied into the car. Sure enough, it needed a battery. Now, I learned something else, too. This company, Jeff Agwell, they sent me. He said, try them out. Guess what? I tried it out on this thing. The battery was dead. It wouldn't even beep the horn. So, you know what I say to this? There it goes, in the garbage. It said it had 6,000 amps. Well, that's a load of baloney. It said it had an 82% charge, which is plenty enough, right? No, garbage. He had one of those big professional ones, cost about 250 bucks at pros use. Started it right up. And the owner thought, well, it couldn't be the battery because I drove it over here. Well, let me tell you something about batteries today. Now, before I forget, I'm going to take this door panel out and look inside. I'm assuming that when the car was wrecked, they didn't fix it right because when we turned the key, it wouldn't unlock the door. And regardless of whether the battery's working or not in the car, it should have unlocked the car. So we'll unscrew the screw in here, get that out of the way. Now you got to pry up so you can get the window motor assembly off for the switches because there's a screw in there. That's the only way you're going to get it out. And we pry this handle off, screw in there too, and then off comes the door panel. We can look inside. And we'll look inside and what do we see? Well, I hate to admit that I'm wrong, but I'm wrong. This thing is so poorly made, it does not have a rod for the key. It is 100% electronic. So, when his battery went dead, the key wouldn't have done any good anyways because it's got to have electric power. The door locks are run by electricity alone. The old cars, you turn the key, there was a rod, the rod would go down, it would unlock the latch or lock the latch, right? That's all done with electronics. I'll show you. As you can see inside, what's in here? Just electric switches. When you turn the key, it just sends electrical impulses. But guess what? If your battery goes totally flat like his did, voila, no power to the electrically operated door system. He couldn't get in his car. You're screwed. Here's why I say electronics, garbage. You throw this stuff on cars, people get stranded. Sometimes you got an electric emergency brake, you run out of power, guess what? It doesn't work anymore. So to everyone who thinks electronics are going to save us, no. They're going to drive us all insane. So if it hadn't been for the nice AAA guy coming over and getting us in and then selling a battery, he would have been screwed. What a stupid... It's bad enough that it's only got a key on the driver's side and not one on the passenger side. But in this case, it wouldn't even have mattered because the one on the driver's side is electronic. They would have put an electronic one on the right side. With no power, it wouldn't have worked either. So... to Honda on this one. So we're gonna jack it up in the air, see what it looks like underneath. The owner says it tracks fine. He doesn't feel any problems or anything, so we're gonna look under. All right, we'll get my flashlight out and we'll start looking. Tires are wearing evenly. I don't see anything bad on this side. So get under the front. It's clean now. Your eye's gonna get superficial rust like that. Now I have to say, so if I don't see any frame damage, I see a normal frame. that's been sitting for all these years going through Massachusetts. Normal rust, normal this. If they would have had the frame damaged and they worked on the frame, it wouldn't have all those rust spots. They would have done welding, they would have repainted it. Just to me, it looks like it's still the factory stock for when it was built. And we'll look under the other side. It's exactly the same to me. Now, there's no saying it wasn't wrecked because I can see plastic may have been bent, so then they cut it here to make it fit better. Probably was warped. But the frame and everything else looks perfectly fine. Again, you can see where the plastic stuff isn't snapped on perfectly, so I mean, yeah, it had work done to it, but I wouldn't say the frame's bent. You can see the tires are wearing even. We'll look at the back one. They're wearing evenly. So is the left rear and the left front. So let's take it for a spin. Back it up, take it for a spin. You can see it's got a decent, though dusty, backup camera. Now you can see it idle smooth as can be. I'll go slow over the giant bump because they're relatively low, these Civics. And here we go. We'll take it on a highway, see how it handles. Also, if the frame and stuff had been bent, you would find the wheel bearings would start to hum because they wouldn't be sitting at the right angle. And when they don't sit at the right angle, guess what happens? They hum. Because they wear and they hum. Okay, now what have we learned? One, I would say that the original Carfax report was right, that it didn't have frame damage. They knew it was a wreck, but it didn't have frame damage. I don't see any evidence of frame damage. So, the car is fine. Got no problems. Number two, they don't make them like they used to. The fact that his battery went dead and we couldn't get in the car, the remote's not going to work. I put a new battery in, but obviously that wasn't it, right? But you always try that. But the physical key wouldn't work. And it wasn't because the door had been wrecked and the piece was missing. The piece never existed in the first place. The old cars, you stuck the key in the lock had a tang, it would pull a rod, the rod would unlock the car and lock it. When you unlock it and lock it with the key. This baby's fully electronic. You turn that key, it's just turning an electric switch. Then it goes electricity down to the motor that locks and unlocks the door. So if you do have a dead battery on one of these babies, like he did, you can't get in if it's locked. So, here is a good idea for anybody. Let's say you're just tooling around. Maybe your battery's old, you don't know. Leave your window rolled down, because at least then you can get in, you can pop the hood, and jump start the car. The AAA guy was nice, sold him a battery, so it's all fixed. But if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, say you go to the beach, leave the window rolled down. So at least you can pop the hood, and if you got a jump starter that works, unlike the one that I showed, which we found out was absolute garbage. 6,000 amps, my rear end, it wouldn't even make the horn beep. That's another thing we learned. Don't buy jump starters until I've tested them out and tell you they're good, because that one is a pile of junk. Still mysteries that we'll never know. Why did one Carfax say the frame wasn't bent, but then 9 months later, a new Carfax says, yes, the frame was bent. He was driving the car the whole time. He didn't wreck it, so the information would have been out there to begin with. This is why I tell you, you can't trust, positive or negative these days. Guys at those companies, they don't know what the heck they're doing. They're just bean counters, right? They just take information, supposedly transfer it to their database. I wouldn't trust as far as you can throw it, because this is a solid car, tracks fine, runs fine, gets good gas mileage. Now, it is a 1.5 turbo, so he's listening to me. He's going to use the full synthetic GF6 oil. He's going to change it every 5,000 miles, because you don't want oil dilution. You want the engine to last, and that GF6 oil is made for these things. But other than that, it's a great car, excepting that they're making everything electronic, and then when it breaks, good luck getting back in your car unless you got a AAA guy nearby to break in and get you into your own car, because you can't open the hood or open the door because it's all electronic. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Judge McKell says, how do I fix misfiring? Got no 5 Mercury, 94,000 miles. Spotters when I'm cruising at 45 to 55. Tester had 29 misfires when I drove. I changed plugs, wires, and coil with no resolution. 5 mechanics have looked and tested it, but they can't figure it out. All right, well, I wouldn't call them mechanics because they have fancy scan tools. Well, they should if they're calling themselves a mechanic. You road test it. The codes come up. That's recorded on the scan tool, the fancy one. Not a little cheap one, but a big fancy one. And there are thousands of bits of data that are recorded, and the mechanic looks at it and figures out what's going on. Sometimes those things get bad valve springs, and they get what's called valve float. And then at a certain speed, they'll get misfires because the valves aren't opening and closing right because the valve springs are worn out. I've seen that happen. And any good mechanic can test that out. The guys you're going to are obviously idiots, and they don't have very much experience, because if they did, they would use their heads and they'd say, well, what have I seen seen this before. A lot of times it's bad valve springs. It could also be a blowing head gasket. All those things can be tested by a mechanic who knows what the heck he's doing. Now, especially if you say it only does it with 45 to 55, first thing I'd think would be weak valve springs, because you're driving along and if they're not sealing right, it does it at higher speeds than at lower speeds. Could easily be that. Find a guy like me in your area that can diagnose that stuff. You took it to 5 guys who obviously don't know what they're doing. They probably have no experience, or they don't have the equipment in order to analyze it right. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.